Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another wonderful episode of STEM Girls Virtual, where we talk about all the careers in the STEM fields. Those fields are science, technology, engineering, and math. My name is Becca, and I'm here on behalf of Cincinnati Museum Center to talk about all this fun STEM stuff with two very special guests. Their names are Colleen, who is an analytical chemist, and Alyssa, who is an automation engineer for the local Procter & Gamble. Hi, ladies. How are you today?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited to learn about your jobs. It's going to be really cool to hear two very different takes in a very STEM-heavy company. So we are really excited to learn with you. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into questions. Is that okay?
Yep,
Sounds
awesome.
good.
Perfect. So our first question is, can you tell us a little bit more about your job? Kind of explain to us what you do, give us a little bit of a day in the life kind of scenario for each of you individually. Colleen, if you want to tell us about your job as an analytical chemist first.
Sure. Yeah, I'm an analytical chemist, which is a type of measurement scientist. So we do a lot of different things in the lab, but overall, what we're trying to do is solve problems from a chemistry perspective. We use analytical instrumentation to make measurements, chemical measurements, physical measurements on materials in order to solve questions. So some of our analytical instrumentation can be really simple. So if you think about a ruler to measure the length of something, or a balance to measure the mass of something. And then some of our instrumentation can be really complex. And some of those more complicated instruments have longer names. So we might use a spectrophotometer to measure the amount of light that can pass through a material. So in order to answer these types of questions, we generally take 3 steps. The first one is separation. So we want to separate the material that we care about from everything else. The next step would be identification. So what is the material exactly? And then the third thing that we can do is quantify. So we can tell how much of a material we have. So when we need to separate things out, we can use physical properties to separate those materials. So for example, you might use a sieve to separate things by size. We sometimes are interested in separating things out by molecular size. So we might use a molecular sieve. We call that size exclusion chromatography. Or we might want to separate things out based on boiling point. And in that case, we would use gas chromatography. So we use different types of techniques to separate a material from everything else. And once we've isolated that material, so that means we have just that material and all the other stuff that came with it has been removed, then we can identify that material. So we have lots of techniques to identify the molecular structure, such as mass spectrometry or NMR. And then once we've identified that material, we can use standards to quantify it. So, so we have a lot of different questions to answer, but the steps are generally the same, that we separate, identify, and then quantify. So to give an example of something that I might do in my own work, we work in baby, family, and feminine care. So sometimes we need to check to make sure that we have produced a product that is that meets our quality standards. So if we have an absorbent article like a diaper or like a fem care pad, and we've applied lotion to the top sheet, sometimes we need to check to make sure that the right amount of lotion has been applied. So in that case, I would try to extract the material off of that top sheet. Typically, I would use a solvent to extract. And then I need to separate that lotion from everything else that might have come with it. So I separate that out, typically using chromatography. And then I want to identify to make sure that it's the right lotion. And then I'll quantify to make sure that we have reached our targets for our application. So that's just one example that I would do in my work in the baby, family, and fem care. And also, a big part of my job is to really understand that question that I'm being asked and determining what is the right technique or what is the right instrument to do that measurement.
Very interesting. That's so cool to think about, all of the research and science that goes behind something, as some, that we think is small, like the lotion on a top layer of something, but there's so much behind it. That's so cool. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that with us. Alyssa, could you tell us a little bit more about what you do as an automation engineer?
Sure. So I work in baby care engineering. And so the short answer of what do I do at work is I take pictures of diapers. To give a little bit more of a longer answer, what I do is I develop online machine vision systems that we use to inspect our diapers as they're being assembled. So these vision systems give us a lot of information. They allow us to reject defective products so that they never reach our consumer. We don't want our consumers to ever get a bad diaper in their package. And then they can also indicate to the operator who's running the lines in the plants where problems might be occurring on the line so that they know where they should go check to see if the process is running at base condition in a certain area when they might be seeing a high number of rejects for a specific problem. Our diapers are produced at crazy fast speeds as well. So all of the vision inspections that I develop must occur at those fast speeds as well. So imagine a series of cars all moving down a road at 25 miles per hour, bumper to bumper. And then as each car passes by, you have to acquire an image, run a vision inspection. So that means looking for different features on the car in this example, and then trying to find defects. And all of that has to happen before the next car arrives. So that analogy is basically what it's like on the diaper line, but instead of cars, it's diapers moving that quickly across the entire converter. Most recently,
that's a lot of images.
yeah, exactly. And we have to do that to inspect every single product. Most recently, I've been actually developing artificial intelligence systems for machine vision. So a little bit different than traditional vision tools, which kind of just look at the pixel values in the image and look for thresholds between dark and bright pixels. With artificial intelligence, where the goal is to be able to segment out specific features of interest on the diaper, and then we want to be able to do that despite any noise that could appear in the image, any process variation, material variation that might make it difficult for the traditional vision tools to detect.
That's so cool. And what's so interesting about hearing from both of you wonderful ladies at the same time is that you guys are both working on similar, like you're both having your hands in one product, like these diapers, and what we see as something that collects waste on babies. It's so intricate, and it takes so many awesome scientists to develop the right product and meet everyone's needs. And that's so cool to hear all those behind the scenes things about one product I had no idea all of that goes into it, and I'm sure those at home had no idea either. It's very cool to hear two very different perspectives on one item and how it's coming together to produce that. So this is going to be fun. So our next question is, please tell us what sparked your interest in this field. Is it something that you always wanted to get into? Is it something that you kind of found yourself in later in life? Alyssa, if you want to tell us about your journey first, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think anybody ever grows up dreaming about becoming a diaper engineer. And I had no idea that this would be my job today when I was growing up. So actually, in fact, I didn't even know what engineering was when I was in high school. So, I mean, first of all, Becca, thank you so much for organizing this STEM Girls virtual program. I'm a big supporter of any STEM outreach programs that reach out to young students to expose them as early as possible. And yeah, I mean, I've always really loved math and science growing up, but didn't really know what engineering was. By the time I reached university, engineering just made sense for me to go into because I liked math and science so much. And I ended up studying chemical engineering because I liked chemistry. Little did I know, later found out that chemical engineering didn't really have a lot to do with chemistry, but then I was already committed, And then I also learned how to code for the first time during my first year of university. And I ended up really loving that. So I decided to also pursue a degree in computer science and engineering as well. And so now that's kind of through different internships and stuff, I figured out that automation engineering is really what I like to do. I like to code, but I don't want to be behind the computer all the time. I like using my skills to work on physical products that people use all the time. So, I mean, even though diapers might not be what you imagine you would be working on when you grow up, I was immediately fascinated by how complex the technology was, which is what drew me into baby care in the first place. And I continue to stay in baby care engineering because I know there's so much more room to continue to grow and learn new things every day. And it really means a lot to me to be working on a product that literally everybody, when they're first born, like they use diapers in their first years of their life. And even though I don't have children of my own yet, it makes me happy knowing that I work on some piece of the puzzle to get products that help make lives easier for parents as they're babying their child.
That's awesome. That's such a great story. And I think it's an awesome example of like, you don't have to know the end of your story, because like you might not know that how your story ends even exists. You didn't know that you were going to be where you are today, but it's such an awesome journey, and it's so fun to find yourself in these positions where you're making a difference and you're doing something fun and exciting and you're always pushing yourself. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Colleen, tell us about your journey.
Yeah. So I was really fortunate to know that I wanted to be a chemist when I was just a little kid. I really was fascinated by chemical reactions. I think all kids love to see things explode and fizz up and make a lot of noise. And I really wanted to understand from a chemical perspective what was going on. And so I really wanted to learn more about what was happening in terms of, the chemistry behind it. And when I was younger, I was also a pretty shy kid. And I thought that I might be really good at working independently in a laboratory. So in reality, chemists rarely work alone. We have to collaborate quite a bit. But I think there was this perception that there was this, solo chemist working in a lab into the late night. And I just thought that that might be something that I was good at. So I remember when I decided that I was going to buy my first chemistry set, and it was I was about 11, so it was probably like the summer before 6th grade. And it was this formative memory that I have where I saved up my money and I went to Toys R Us and I selected that chemistry set. And I remember the cashier asking me if I wanted to be a scientist when I grew up. And I told her, I'm going to be a chemist. So when I took that chemistry set home, I was ready to open it up and mix a whole bunch of stuff together and see what exploded. But what I found was that there was a workbook inside of my chemistry set, and there were so many chemistry problems and math problems and word problems to do in order to understand what was happening during those chemical reactions. So I was really surprised how much work went into really learning what was happening. And it turns out that it's not just about mixing things together. I think there's this idea that chemists just mix things together all day and see what happens. But there's a method to it. So it's really the scientific method. So the scientific method has 7 steps. The first step is to formulate that question. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve? What's the question that we have that we want to learn more about? And the next thing we do is background research. So what's already been done? What do we already know? And then the third step is to formulate that hypothesis. So what do we expect to happen? And then we do an experiment to test out whether our hypothesis is correct. And then we make observations, draw conclusions, and then the last step is communicating to the rest of the scientific community. So what did I find and how can I share that with my peers? So out of 7 steps in the scientific method, there's really only 1 step that involves an experiment. So that was something that was really new to me, was that there's really a stepwise method to learning chemistry. And then there's also one other piece of information that I learned in high school. So my high school chemistry teacher, her name was Miss Zerby. She told us to look at the word chemistry, and she would break it up into chem is try. And she told us that we are not born understanding chemistry, but we can try. And if we try and we work through those problems and we give it some effort, anyone can learn chemistry. It's all about trying and practicing and just giving it our best shot.
I like that. I really like that. That's a fun way to look at it. And that's such a cool story that, you did know when you were a kid, and then you pursued it, but then you kind of discovered that there were so many different elements to it as you kept going into it. And I think that's part of the fun, So our next question is, what is one of the coolest experiences that you have had as part of your career? I'm going to ask you first, Colleen. What is one of the coolest things or most interesting things that you have been a part of as part of your career?
Yeah, I think at P&G, it's always really exciting to be part of a product launch. So we work on these products sometimes for years on end. And when we see a product go to market, and then we can go to the store and see that product on the shelf and just be able to say, hey, I worked on that. It's really exciting to see our work actually produce a product that can help improve someone's life just a little bit. So really early on in my career, I worked on a product called Always Infinity. So it's a fem care pad. And there's a lot of really cool technology that went into making that product. And I was one of many, many chemists who worked on that product. And the launch was such a great celebration. And just knowing that that product was going to market so that it would improve the lives of girls and women just a little bit, it really made me proud to have worked on that product. And I also got to spend some time in the plant where those products were being manufactured. So it was a real contrast to see the work that I did in a lab versus the scale of these products being manufactured. It was really cool to see that contrast because, as Alyssa was saying, like these products are made at such high speeds and in such quantity. It's really two different worlds. So it was really cool to be able to see those products being made.
That sounds very cool. And Alyssa, same question for you. What is one of the coolest experiences that you've had as part of your career?
So besides all the technical work that I've gotten to do, which was super exciting, my absolute favorite part of my job is that I've gotten the privilege to work with so many people across the US and around the world. Baby care is a global business, so being able to work with my colleagues that are sitting on the other side of the world has been an amazing experience so far. And there's some tough times too, when you sometimes have to get on calls at 6 a.m. or at 9 o'clock at night. And I've also learned a lot about working effectively with colleagues from other countries. I've learned that sometimes I need to take a totally different approach compared to working with colleagues from the United States so that we understand each other. And I'm so grateful for the opportunities I've had to travel with P&G, to see the world, honestly. I've gotten to experience other cultures, and I've had the opportunity to make friends too. So after only 3.5 years with the company, I've developed relationships with people that I now consider my really good friends. I've gotten to go to Germany and Italy and Japan, and even some of our other locations in the United States as well. So it's been a really amazing experience.
Very cool. Yeah, that working with people from around the world and learning about different cultures and just how others do things is, I think, so cool and so enriching. So those are both very cool experiences. Thank you for sharing those with us. So our next question is, what is the challenge that you faced on your journey to the career you're in today, and how did you overcome it? We know that Sometimes we have challenges in our own lives, and sometimes it helps to learn from others on how they handled their own challenges. So Alyssa, I'll ask you first, if you could tell us a little bit about a challenge that you overcame.
Sure. So when I first started my career at P&G, I felt that it was challenging for me to really hit the ground running in my first several months. I was put in an electrical engineering role, which wasn't my area of expertise and maybe not my passion area either. So there was already a huge steep learning curve to begin with. And, on top of that, coming into this field, I was the youngest in my group by far, and I was one of the only females. And so I really felt like I had to really kind of go the extra mile to prove myself and be seen as somebody who can contribute just as much as my other colleagues who have had a lot more experience. So I got a lot of support. I feel like this being put in the situation really helped me grow a lot, and it turned me into who I am today, which is great. But yeah, it was challenging at first, but now after a few years of really hard work and persistence, now my colleagues view me as a go-to person for online machine vision systems. And so I just want to say, like, times can be challenging sometimes, especially in these STEM fields, but with persistence and as long as you have the passion, you are able to overcome those challenges and really become an expert and have others view you that way as well.
Thank you. That's fantastic advice. And Colleen, same question for you. Any challenges that you've had to overcome, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things that was a real challenge when I first started at P&G was that none of our labs have all the instrumentation that we need at all times. And I think that scientists are pretty self-reliant by nature. I think that goes back to the perception of, the lone scientist working in a lab. And so one of the things that I needed to learn early on at P&G was that sometimes we need to get work done through others. So if I don't have the right instrument in my lab, I might need to collaborate with the scientist in a completely different organization and get the analysis that I need through them or through their lab. And likewise, we have instrumentation in our lab that might not exist in a different business unit. And so a lot of times we'll have to do work for others so that they can get their problems solved as well. So it became very important very early on to build these collaborative relationships with others so that we can be more effective problem solvers.
That's also great advice. There's no I in team is cliche, but it is such a true statement. So you've both given fantastic advice with that last question. We do have one final question. Do you have any advice for any young folks wanting to pursue a career in a STEM field? Colleen, I'll go to you first. Any advice you'd like to give?
Yeah, I'm going to put a plug in there for graduate school. It was a really great investment for me to go to graduate school. So sometimes when I talk to folks about the idea of pursuing a PhD, I get a little bit of pushback, and there are two main reasons that I usually hear people give for why they don't want to go to graduate school. The first one is that they don't want to go into debt. And the second one is that they've had enough school and they want to get started on their real life, air quotes for that. So I just want to address those two misnomers. First of all, a PhD in the physical sciences. So we're talking chemistry, physics, geology, astronomy. In general, the university will pay tuition for grad students. And in addition to that, grad students work for the university either as a teaching assistant, teaching a lab class or chemistry recitation, and they're doing work in the lab there for the university. So in in turn, the university will pay a stipend or a living wage. Grad students generally get health insurance, dental insurance. So it's very possible to go through graduate school without going into debt at all. And then the second idea about putting life on hold, I certainly didn't feel like my life was on hold during graduate school. It gave me an opportunity to live in a new city for 4 years, and I met chemists from all over the world. A lot of those people have become lifelong friends of mine, and I was able to do research that I was really passionate about for a number of years before, going into industry. So it's a really great investment in your future career, and I would just encourage people to give that a real consideration.
Thank you. And then Alyssa, any advice you'd like to give?
Yeah, I would say that if you don't know what your passions are yet, keep exploring different things. There are so many possibilities for a career in STEM, and you'll really only be able to dip your toes in a few of them before you graduate from university. But that's okay. Step outside your comfort zone and try that thing that you've never heard of, because who knows, like maybe you might end up loving it or not. If you don't, then you still learned a valuable lesson about what you don't like. So I did try to do that as I went through university as well. I started out, my first internship was in supply chain. That was not for me. Totally respect those who do that. But then I tried a role in research and development in the materials group. I liked that a lot. And then I tried another company where I got into automation and controls engineering, and that's really where I found what my passion area was, and then came back to P&G to do that as my full-time role. And maybe in 10 years or so, I'll want to try a different role in P&G. There's so many different things you can do, so just keep exploring, figure out what your passions are and what they aren't. And then over time, you'll just get a better and better understanding of what you're looking for in a career. And yeah, the best way to get that understanding the most quickly is to just keep trying new things early on.
That's fantastic advice. Colleen, Alyssa, thank you so much for giving us all that amazing advice, telling us about your amazing careers. Now we know when we're looking at stuff on the shelves, you had your hands in it, and so now we have a face with the product, and that is super exciting. That is all we have time for today. Thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us, Becca.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you, Becca.
Of course. And thank you all for tuning in. Keep checking out more amazing videos from Cincinnati Museum Center. We have dance parties, vintage beauty tutorials, more STEM Girls virtual videos. Museum on Tap is doing amazing things. So keep checking it out and keep learning Cincinnati. Bye, everyone.